Different branches of the trees. Which branch exactly? I'm not quite sure, I can't remember. But now I'll tell you the story. So, during the Second World War, my father was away for 6 years, he was a soldier, and I just lived with my mum. And she was a wonderful mum to have, I was very lucky. She was really great, in so many ways. But what I want to tell you about is the way in which she loved to go on walks and to discover things. Almost everything was interesting to her. Flowers and trees and birds and geology. In fact, I often laugh about having slightly bent back, because I say sometimes, it's not really fair on my mother, but my mother loved geology. And even as a small child, before my back was properly formed, she made me carry a haversack. And when she found a bit of rock that she liked, she'd say, "Let me put it in your haversack." "Ah, here's a bit of magnesium limestone," she said, and put it in my haversack. At the age of 5, I was kindly. It's not quite true, Mum, forgive me. But we often had to carry lots of rocks back home. Whatever we did, we were looking at flowers and trees and rocks and birds and historical sites. Now, we were in Whitby. So here's Britain, here's London, Scotland at the top, and Whitby is simply halfway up the coast on the right-hand side. It's a little port. It's a beautiful place. And just inland, I was with my mother, just a few miles inland. And we were walking and we were looking at trees and plants. And then she looked through her binoculars at a big horse chestnut tree. And she said, "Andrew, I can't believe it. In the tree over there is a golden oriole." Now this bird called a golden oriole, it's about this size from beak to the tip of its tail. And the male of the species is bright yellow. A bright yellow. Its wings are black, so the contrast is very striking. The female actually is all different shades of green, I suppose to hide in the foliage. But the male is just bright yellow with black wings. And they don't, as it were, belong to Britain. They're hardly ever seen there. And I suppose it must have been perhaps blown by a heavy wind in the wrong direction. It finished up in that bit of England. But it was there. And my mum said, "Look through the binoculars." So I was looking as well, 8 years old. Delighted to see that bird, that bright yellow bird, and feel my mother's excitement. Well, we watched until it disappeared, and we went back the next day. Let's go and see if the golden oriole is still there. And during that holiday, we went every day, but we didn't see it again. And we didn't see it where we lived, in the centre of England, ever. But the next year when we went to Whitby, we went to the same place. Perhaps we will see the golden oriole, but we didn't see it. And the years went by. The years went by until I was in my teens, and I stopped going on holiday with my mum, and my dad had come back from the war as well. I stopped going on holiday. But as the years went by and I became a grown-up, then that golden oriole represented that time with my mum, all those years of sharing. And we often referred to it, the golden oriole. And so, when she was 80 years old, and I wondered what I could give her as a present, and I felt I would like to give her a golden oriole. Well, how could I do that? But I'm a painter. So I painted a picture of a golden oriole, a small one. I've got it in the house. I painted the picture of the golden oriole, and I gave that to her. I didn't need to say why. She knew that that was that sharing that we had all those years ago. And so she treasured it. And the years went by, and she died. And I came to live here. And Julie and I bought the little house that was down there, and then we had the house extended. And all the earth was taken out of the cellars, and there was a great pile of earth just here. just here, actually around this tree here, this plum tree, and down there, that's the hill, out of the cellar of the house. But here there was a hill, and I was sitting on this hill, just where you are now, more or less, and the house was almost completed, and the men were on the roof, putting the tiles on the roof, those tiles that you can see there. There must have been 4 or 5 men. They were from Transylvania, because in Hungary we often employ, particularly for roofs, Transylvanian builders. They're Hungarians, but they live in Transylvania. They were on the roof, and I was thinking, what a lucky man I am. Phew, this wonderful garden, as it will be, and that beautiful house, and a lovely wife, and gosh. Then I looked up there, just by chance, and on a little branch there, I don't know which one it was, but just out there to the right, there was a golden oriole. I hadn't seen a golden oriole for 50 years. But I dreamt of golden orioles. I loved golden orioles. For 50 years I hadn't seen one. And then I heard my mother's voice. And I didn't experience it as internal. I experienced it as really filling the sky. It was like a mighty voice, but she wasn't shouting. It was her voice. And she said, in her disapproving voice, which was very rare for her to be disapproving, she said, "Andrew, I don't agree with all the things you've been doing in recent years, but I wish you well with this new house." And her voice was so loud, and I did experience it as not inside but as outside. I looked up at the men on the roof, expecting them to be looking like this, and they weren't. They were just continuing to put the tiles on the roof. And I turned and the bird had gone, but it really had been there. The branch was moving a little bit. And over the years, in the early spring, I got used to the idea now that golden orioles do come to Hungary. They hide. Most Hungarians have no idea that these birds come all the way from South Africa, all the way to Hungary and other places in Central Europe. They come all this way. And sometimes I hear their song. It's not a real song. It's this. So a very limited song. But there we are, a beautiful bird. And one final little thing on this story, which brings me back to the internet and how much I love it. I put that story of the golden oriole onto my website, and I had somebody write to me and say they liked the story, and I realized that it was an Arabic name, and so I wrote back to him and said, "I'm very glad you like the golden oriole, but tell me what was your connection?" And he wrote to me, so I emailed him, and he wrote back to me from Alexandria and said that the golden orioles always came to their old fruit tree in the early spring because they'd flown all the way from South Africa and they were tired, and they came to his fruit tree where he'd been born and brought up. And he said, we loved them, and my father loved them. Neighbours would like to shoot them, he said, but if they came to our tree they were safe. And when they'd become strong, they then flew across to Crete, and then probably across to Greece, and then up into Europe, and some of them coming to Hungary. And then I thought, well, I've got, what do you call it? Not Global Earth, Google Earth. Google Earth, and I adore that, because it gives me, I never expected to have a magic carpet in my life when I read about it when I was a child. But now you get into Google Earth and you're on a magic carpet. You zoom in the heavens over places and you can just come down and look at places. So I wrote him and said, please give me your address, your postal address. And he sent it to me. So I was able to Google Earth it, and I came down over Alexandria. I was sitting here at my internet, over Alexandria and down to his garden. And there wasn't one tree in there. There were about 6 trees. So I had to email him back again. I said, which tree is it? The fruit tree. He said, it's the one by the garage at the bottom of the garden. So I had another look, and I could sit here. I could sit here. Now, isn't that magic? Isn't that the most beautiful thing in the world? We actually have now access to a magic carpet. And I was able to see my new friend's old fruit tree at the end of his garden while sitting here. And I still write to him 2 or 3 times a year and say, have the golden orioles come yet? Oh yes, they've come. They're getting strong. They'll be with you in a couple of weeks. Here we are.